So the next thing that we want to look at is how to make a save game. There's various different components to this. There's the user interface where you'll have the buttons that you can click to actually save, load and clear your save game file. Then you'll have some of the under the hood stuff to be looking at, the save game file itself, and then elements that are going to connect all of that together. So we will start with the actual save game file itself. So if you right click in your content browser, and we're just going to create a new blueprint, and in the all classes search bar, if you just type save, we'll find save game. So if we click on that, click select, and we'll just call this BP underscore, again, we'll go for our save, so it's similar to some of the naming conventions we've used. And if we Control Shift S, save that, double click on our save. And the only thing that we really need to worry about putting in here, obviously the bigger your game gets, this could mean a lot of things, but the only thing that we need to put in here is the variables that we actually want to save. There's no code we should be writing in the event graph or anything like that, just a bunch of variables added. So if I go back to my map, what we actually want to save, so if I press play, let's have a look, it's just these stats here is ultimately what we're looking to save in this example. So the health and the money, both of these are attributed to the player. So if we go to our player, a nice easy way to do that is we can just copy and paste some of these in. So if we click on player health, right click, copy, go to BP our save, right click, paste variable, and we've got a reference to it there. Our player, player money, copy that, go over to BP our save, same thing, right click in that variable space. I think if you right click there it might still work. It's duplicate so you can't do it there. So definitely right click where it says variables here. Paste the variable, and now we've got reference to two things. And once you've got all of your variables that you want to save in this save game file, then that's it. For this, we don't need to worry about it anymore. We can close that off, and that is taken care of. So once we have that sorted, the next thing that we need to look at is actually instigating the save, and the best way to do that is to create a user interface. So if we go to content, and into our user interfaces folder, and we can create a new user interface. So right click, user interface, widget blueprint, just a standard widget blueprint, stick with the naming conventions, UI underscore, and we'll call this, let's call it save widget, so it's a little bit different from other save items that we're going to create. Save widget, and double click on that. So drag that up here so we've got something to work with. The usual stuff that you'll have been through before already. So if we just drag a canvas panel onto there, and then there's three actions which we want. We want save, load, and clear. So we need three separate buttons for that. So if I just drag one button onto the scene, maybe make it a little bit bigger, let's say 200 by 80. And in terms of the anchors, just so it's spaced out quite nicely, we're going to anchor this to the top right. And we'll just drag that up a little bit. So this is going to be our save button, but before we do anything else, if we just drop a text element actually into the button itself, so you can see how that's actually attached to that. If I move the button around, the text will follow it. So we just need to change that text. So this is going to be our save. So just decided to use all uppercase buttons there. It's not pretty, but that's something we can deal with later. So once we've got the button details that we need, we can just Control D and Control D again, and now we've got three different buttons to play with. So now we can just name them. So this button is button underscore save. This button underscore load. And this button underscore clear, and just change the text so that matches up. So that was the clear, so we've got clear there, and load for this. So if we just drag these into position so that they're relatively neatly arranged, use the arrow keys just to fine tune a little bit, and drag that up. So I think that's about right. Again, it's not particularly pretty, but it should still be functional. Just going to move them over just a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so we will compile that. And before we actually put any functionality into the UI itself, what it would be nice to do is just see that actually appearing in our game, so we know that that's kind of oriented in the way that we want it. But in order to do that, again, we could have that persistently, we could have this in the HUD, we could have it just there all of the time. But what I would like to do is actually make the element or the action of opening and closing this kind of save game menu something which is interactable within the game. So again, from a design perspective, there's a load of different ways that we could do this, but I'm just going to create like a save game interactive actor to put into this scene. So what I'm going to do is go to the content folder, we'll go back to BP, and I'm going to create a new blueprint class again. So just a bog standard actor, BP, and I'm going to call this save point. So this is going to be a location in the game environment that once the player character gets close enough to, it will open and then close that menu once they move away from it. So we'll start with BP save point and then double click here. So we started to get a number of different things that are going to be open, and this is going to be something we'll just have to get used to, but it should be easy enough to follow along with. So the first thing is just some sort of visual reference for where that save point is going to be. So I'm just going to create a static mesh. Ideally, you should be using custom naming conventions for everything that you do, but we're just going to be a little bit well, lazy, I suppose. But we'll just put some sort of different mesh that'll stand out a little bit. Cone, that should do, and then give it some kind of material so it's a little bit nicer. What have we got? Chrome. Yeah, that should be all right. I'm not sure about the scale. It may need to be a little bit bigger, so if we set that to 2. And go into the map, and then with that, just double check I have actually, yeah, it's not saved, but it is compiled, so it should be okay. I can drag that into the scene. The way it's set up is a little bit low, so drag that in so it takes up all of the space, and there we go, that's our save point. But obviously the player can't travel through that, it's got collision attached to it automatically, so what I will then do is just put kind of a ring of like a collision detector around the static mesh itself, so that'll be our trigger. So if I go to the default scene route and click add and just type col, we should get collision. We'll go for a sphere collision. That's obviously very small. If I change the sphere radius for that to not 10 but 100, that's still a little bit small, so if we try 150 and then drag that down so that it's, yeah, kind of creates this circle area around that the player can move into. And then there's a few different things that we're going to need here. We're going to need to have an event overlap, begin overlap, and end overlap. So it's the sphere collider that we're after. So if I actually, with that selected, if I scroll down from the details panel, I've got all the list of events that I can use here. So we need the component begin overlap, and click on sphere again, and then component end overlap. Now, very similarly to what we had in place for the shop, you'll remember it needed to make sure that it was only being triggered when it was the player character which was going in and out of this particular space. If we didn't have something which checked for the player character, then the particles, the projectiles would actually kind of open and close the shop, which we definitely don't want. So just to be a little bit lazy, if we go back into our kind of main environment here and look for that BP shop, we can grab that code. So as you can see, it was just getting that overlap, checking that it had the substring of player from the object name, which obviously only the player character has, and then using that as a way of separating one from the other. So with that in place, just Control C, Control V. I can pop that there, pop that there. Other actor is what's going to go into the get object name. And then that's our way of being able to make sure we're only triggering when the player actually goes into that space. And then we'll kind of come back to this and add a little bit more elements to it as we go. But the next thing that we need to do immediately is just create that widget that we made at the beginning, so we can just see that it's working and that the first kind of chunk of code that we've worked through is working correctly. So it's UI save widget that we created, and pull that from return value, and it's add to viewport, and we can just place that like so. And then for this side, in fact, actually, before I do that, good practice, we return value promote variable. Place that in here like so. Get rid of that link. Pop that there, and then if we just rename this variable save widget so it's clear what the reference is to. That's not correct. Just get rid of that erroneous D. Okay, so that will then add that to the viewport, and then we can drag that save widget reference into the scene and drag up from that and remove from parent is what we're looking for. And that will take that widget and remove it. So hopefully what should happen here is we can press play, move around the scene. If we get close enough to the save game point, it's opening our widget. That's what we wanted, great, and I should be able to move away, and it's gone. Fantastic. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is go back to our user interface save widget and start putting a little bit of functionality in here. So the first thing that I would like to do is have it so that the buttons update in terms of whether they are enabled or disabled, and that's based on whether there is a save game already attached to the game. So if I just go to create a new event, add event, user interface, event construct, and if I then drag up from there and just type in save, you'll be able to see there's a number of different load and save game functions. And what we want is, does save game exist? So this will check the slot name, see if there is, I think it's like in a writable file, it will check to see whether something with that slot name attributed does have a save game within it, and then it will return a Boolean value. So the first thing we need to do is just give this slot name an actual name. So if we promote that to a variable, because it'll be easier to slot in this reference and plug it in each time when we call these different types of functions than to type it in manually every time. So we've already got two here anyway. So if I get rid of that, drag slot name in here, and you can see as a default I've got this set to the slot name of 1. You could call that whatever you like. Of course, the idea here is that you have this option to expand the save game system so that you could give the player, say 3 save game slots that are individual buttons that you could click on to save to slot 1, 2, or 3, or you could have it almost infinitely expandable where the player could, identify, could label their own save game name, and then when they type in that save name, that will find saves attributed to that name and it will return them. But we're going to keep things nice and simple. Obviously this could be something you might want to expand upon in your own work, but here there is just going to be one save game file for the player, and it's always going to be referred to as 1, and that's what's going to plug in to all of our save game functions. So in this instance, what's going to happen is the widget is going to be constructed. It's going to get that slot name and check if there is a save game attached to that slot name. And then what I want to do is get some references to the clear button and the load button. And if I click out here and just type is enabled, and it's set is enabled, which we need for both of these buttons. So we can copy and paste there, connect both of these in like so. I think for me, when the lines kind of cross over in this particular way, because the buttons aren't, or the arrangement is, if this enabled was at the bottom and target was a bit higher, I might put this at the top. But I think if you are going to cross the stream, so to speak, I think it's nicer to keep this as minimal as you possibly can. It's not very disruptive if you just tuck it away underneath there. So what's happening here is it's getting references to the clear button and the load button, and then if there is a game that exists in this slot, that will return a value of true. And so obviously if there was a save game, we want the player to have the option of clearing that save game file or loading that save game file. If there aren't any save game files, then both of those would be set to disabled, and there should be a clear kind of graphic representation of that. So what we should see is they're kind of ghosted out when we start playing the game. So just quickly test that. Press play, move the player around, move to the save point, and here you can see we have the option to click save. Obviously nothing happens yet, but load and clear don't do anything at all at this point. So while we're here, one other quick and easy thing to do will be to set up the functionality for the clear buttons. So if we click on the clear button, and you can see in the details panel we've got all the different event interactions. So it's on clicked, is that what we're looking for. So I will drag that I have it underneath event construct. Maybe kind of make a code that's kind of like all the activities have happened on start. And now this is our clear button functionality, which is nice and straightforward. If we drag out from the event, what we can see, or the execution I should say of the event, what we can do is again go to save, and we've got different options here, and we've got delete game in slot. And the only thing we need there is to get the slot name and place that there, and that will delete whatever save game is attributed to that slot name. The other thing that we want to do is then kind of impact on these buttons as well, because once the button is, or once a save game is cleared, then the ability to both clear and load is no longer relevant. So we need to change those. But again, a nice quick and easy way, we can just copy and paste that and place that as so, and then just have that as deselected. So the minute a game is deleted from the slot, then it will set the clear button to disabled. You could separate these out if you wanted and just have them both like that, but obviously if that's disabled, that will link into that one, but this makes it a bit clearer. So both the clear button and the load button will become disabled when you press clear, because once you've already cleared the game, there is no game that you can load, so there's no need to press that button, and there's no need to press that one either. So we'll just compile that, give it a quick comment. And there we go. So now we have that. Where things are going to get a little bit more complicated is with the loading and saving. So the first thing that we need to do is again get references to these buttons being clicked. So we've got load and we've got button saved. Okay, so we're going to start off with the save to begin with. So if we drag it from the executable, and we're going to, create a save. Create save game object, and we need to check our class. So right at the beginning we made our own save game class, so it was BP our save, got that. And then if we drag out from the return value, we're going to promote this to a variable because we're going to reference it a couple of times later, and this is going to be our save file. So if I could type correctly, it would be a little bit better. Let's try that again. Save file, again without that uppercase. There we go. And then what we need to do, we will kind of put something in between these two nodes in a moment, but for the time being we just want to connect to a save game to slot. And again we need a reference to the slot name, so we can drag that in there and place that just there. What we're going to place in between here is a separate event which we're going to create. So we should add event and a custom event, and we're going to call this player character save. Now this is something which is more in line with how I tend to go about doing this. It's not necessarily something you'll see in all of the tutorials, and it's not really kind of the most, just slightly more complicated kind of architecture way of doing things. But what I like to do is, rather than just trying to make this massive collection of all the different variables from all the different actors that I want to save, is putting a little bit of a hierarchy and a structure in place. So I can focus on just getting everything from the player character as one particular function, and then everything from, say, an enemy as a different function, or other sorts of stats or elements that I want to save, just helping to kind of place them in their own little boxes so it's a little bit neater and tidier to work with. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a player character custom event here. I'm going to reference that here. I think just to make it a little bit neater. So after there's two things, just need to neaten this up a little bit. So that's going to happen before we do the save game to slot. I'm just going to rename that so it's something a little bit better. Player character save, a little more precise. And in this instance, I want to get the player character. So get player character, and we're going to cast to our player. Quite literally, cast to our player. And then what we need to do is actually have the functionality in the player character drag or connect to the save game file, and actually connect the stats or the various variables within the player character and have them connect to the save game, or as we're loading, effectively do the reverse. So we'll leave that as it is for now. But what we need really is a reference in the player character to actually save the player. So if I actually go to our player character, we can put some of that functionality in here. So I'm going to create an event here, again, custom event. I'm going to call this save player, just for my own sanity, so I remember. We'll duplicate this because we're going to do exactly the same thing for loading. So load player, and then this is going to be triggered by the UI5 widget of pressing the save button, which will run through the player character save, which is here, and that will open that button. So to connect those up, back to our player, it was save player is what we were looking for. So as BPR player, save player, that's the function that we're going to call. And once we've pressed save, the idea is that regardless as to whether we're overwriting an existing save or creating a new one from scratch, what we do definitely want to have is the load buttons, whatever state they're currently in, and the save button, whatever state it's currently in, to become visible again. So we definitely want those as enabled. So we can just grab them here, button clear and button load, bring them down. And so whenever the player character presses save, that will actually enable the load and clear buttons, which of course makes sense the minute the save game is available. If the player wants to clear it, to erase it, start again, or just immediately load it for whatever, or the minute they go back into they open this widget, it should open as enabled because of what we've got in place here. So now things are getting a little bit messier. What I want to do is just tidy it up a little bit. So just a little bit of commentary. If I'm going to drag over all of these, and these are going to be basically kind of like my overall save. So I'm just going to call this main save, and I'm going to make this dark, widen this up a little bit, and then identify this as something separate. Again, you could compress these down. I could right click and collapse these to functions or macros if I want, but just so everything stays visible, I'm just going to use commentary to kind of separate that out. So again, just press C, hovering over that, and this is going to be my player character save. Again, the idea is I'm not going to extend this any further because all of the variables I actually want to save are in my player character, but if I had variables attributed to other actors that I wanted to save or get from other places within the game, then I would have this created, as a separate event that would have separate functionality. Again, very similar to this, but then they would all be connected to that main save. Again, just helping keep things a bit compartmentalized and a bit easier to read. So going back now to our player character save, the idea is, of course, we press the save button. It creates this save game object, creates a reference to it that we can draw to, and then it triggers this event here of player character save, which gets the player character and then casts to that in order to open this custom event. So let's go to this custom event now. So if we open our player, so it's the save player that we were looking at, and what we need to have here is a way of connecting in the save game file to our player health and player money. Now, one thing that we need to do is get the actual save game object reference to that save game object to connect in with this event to keep things nice and neat. So in that save player, we can go to inputs, and this new parameter that we are going to call, let's just call it save file. save file. In terms of the type, if you type in save, there could be should be a couple of options, and it's a save game. Object reference is what we're after. So if we compile that, and then if we drag up from that and cast to save, we've got BP our save. If I just go back to the save point widget, because you'll then notice you can see how that save player reference has now got an option for a save file to actually be attributed it. You can't use anything from the drop down, so we need to connect that in, but that was the point of creating this save game file. So we create that save game object. It's that reference is what we need to plug in here. So if we grab the save file, get, place that in there, tuck that underneath. If we compile that there and go back to our player, so now that is going to be what comes out here. So, sorry, that's what's going to come out of the save game file that we're then casting to, and so that we can start actually connecting in the stats that we saved all the way back here in our save. So remember, if I open that, you can just remember we've got our own separate references to player health and player money. So to know that we've done that correctly in our player, at this point as cast to our save, we should be able to drag out and just type in health. Yep, and we've got a reference to the player health. Now, because we're saving, we want to set the player health value of the save file. So it's definitely set player health. And if we go to money, set player money, health to health, just connect those up like so. Again, a little bit of double clicking on the nose to neaten it up. Drag that to there, like so. Move those down so it's a nice straight line. And basically, we are taking the established variables, whatever the current player health and player money is that's attributed to our player, that is what we want to save. So it's a simple case of dragging player health here, placing it in like so, player money, placing it in like so, connecting it in like that. And in terms of load player, we need to do exactly the same thing. So we need that reference to the save file that we're going to cast to, and then we're going to do very similar to this. We're effectively just going to invert it. So if we go back to our UI save widget, as you can see, save player here has got what we need, but we've not got anything for load yet. So effectively what we need to do is duplicate, or very similarly, put together this kind of functionality, but for load, to connect to our on-clicked button load. So in order to do that, we'll follow the same approach. If we drag this just to the right, move it out of the way, and this is going to be our main save, our main load, that will create a custom event that will be for the player character load. But if we just follow along from this, because the first thing we just need to do is create that load object. So if we type in load, and it's load game from slot that we're after, so maybe load game will give us what we need. Yep, load game from slot. Again, exactly the same. Drag the get slot name, place that in as so. Return value, again, we need to reference this. Just promote to variable. We're going to call this one, rather than save file, we'll call it load file, like so. And then, because once we've got that, we then want to activate, each individual actor that we want to save things within. That we want to load things from. In this case, of course, it's only the player, because we're not worried about the player character, anything other than the player character. So player character load. Again, you can see if I just zoom out, it's exactly the same principle really. We're loading from the slot instead of saving from the slot, but then we're triggering a player character reference to a custom event, but rather than being saved this time, it's load. And if I then, again, we can follow pretty similar to here actually. If I take the player character, we can grab that. That's going to be placed as such. And then, because we've already created our load reference in the BP our player, load player, is there, which is exactly what we want. But again, you'll notice that there's nowhere to plug in our load file. So if I go back to BPI player, and again, as you can see, unlike save player, which has got that extra input, the load player does not yet, so we need to do the same thing here. So we're going to call this again. It's just very similar. We're just talking load instead of save in most cases. It's still going to be the BP save game, so that's still exactly the same, so that's fine. If I now go back to the save widget, you can see that's now got a load file there. We've got the reference to the load file, so get that, place in there, and that's the only thing that we need to do for this main load. So again, if I comment on all of that, so that's my main load. Make that a little bit larger, drag that across a bit, and that's PC load. No, I probably shouldn't say PC. That's terrible shorthand. Player character load. Okay, so that should be everything within the UI widget for the load functionality to work. Apart from connecting these two things up. The moment you press the click button and then nothing happens. So we need to make sure there's a reference to player character load here. So player character load. Drag that up a little bit. Compile, just do a quick save now. Okay, and that's everything there. Now we need to go back to our player. Right, so back into our player, and what we need to do from the load player is we need to cast from this object. So this time we're casting again. We're still casting to BP save game, or BP hour save, I should say. And then as that, we're doing the reverse of this. So rather than getting the player health and the player money from BP hour player, from actually our existing current player character variables, and then setting the save game, we're getting them from the save game and attributing them or updating these player character variables. So again, pretty much this, just in reverse. So when we're dragging these player and health and money variables, we're doing the same thing, but this time we want to set them rather than get them. So set player health and set player money. So if we connect those up like that, and then we're going to, rather than setting them from the BPR save, we're going to get them from BPR save. So again, get player money. I should have done health first. I'll just go there. Get player health. We'll go there. I just neaten this up. This is terribly untidy. I can go like so. Just drag that into place there. Okay, so we can then, again, we'll just put a little bit of commentary on here. So this is load player variables, and this one of course is save. Right, and there we go. So the next thing that we need to do once we've got all of these variables in place, now hopefully if we've done everything correctly, under the hood, if we were pressing the load, save and clear buttons, everything would be working, but we wouldn't be able to tell that it was working because there's no way that currently we're visualizing any of these changes. We need a way of being able to show that these stats are actually being affected, they're being loaded and saved correctly, because otherwise we don't know that it works. But in order to do that, we need to connect that up to the hood. So what we can do, because we already have in our player, we've got a reference to the UI hood. We can bring this in here. Obviously, when we save, we don't need to update anything, so it's in the load is where it's important. So I don't know why I dragged that out. Close that there. Move this out a little bit. And then from the UI hood, because in the hood again we should already have these elements. If you've been following along with the tutorial, there should be references to the player spend, so and the player hit. So if I'll do player hit first and also player spend. So just to remind you of what that is, if I could just go back here, go to our content, user interface UI HUD. So there's our variables, the health variable and the money variable. And if I go to the graph, this is all the functionality that's in there. But you can see player hit and player spend are these custom events that will take whatever the value is of the player health and the player money from the player character, and then they will update these text values, health VAR and money VAR. So that's what's happening there. So if I go back to BPR player, it would make probably most sense if we space these out a little bit. So in fact, I'm just going to duplicate UI HUD across, otherwise again it's getting very untidy. So we'll do the player health and then update that in the HUD. So, and then we do the player money and then update that. And it should be a simple case of just grabbing the player money there into the money there and the player health, because obviously that needs to happen, those need to be connected in, otherwise it'll just return a value of 0 when we update our HUD. So if we compile that, we'll save it as well. So the chances of everything working perfectly are very unlikely, but we'll give it a go and just see where we're up to. If we press play, so move the character around, move it into the space. So save is active, but load and clear aren't. And I move away and that disappears. That is what we wanted to happen. But if we just change some of our stats so we can see it's definitely working. So we'll change our health there to 80, change our ammo, spend money on ammo and send our money down to 60. So 80, 60, the variables that effectively we're going to be saving. And if we click save, now load and clear are available. So what we should be able to do, if 80 and 60 are active, is let's change that. So it's now 40. So it's 80 and 60 we're trying to get, but now we've gone to 20 and 60. Change that. So 20 and 10, but it's 80 and 60 was what's saved in the game. So if we go to here, click load, and it's worked. We've gone back to 80 and 60. If we click clear, again, now the current stats stay exactly the same. The save game option is available. If I actually close out of the game and open it back up again because we pressed clear, if I press load, obviously, well, I can't press load, nothing's in place, but just to test that's worked correctly, if we go here again, set that down to, I set it all the way, 100 and 0, or 80 and 0. So if I then go over here, save this, close out of the game, load it back up again. So again, we've not pressed load yet, it's just saved in. Go over here to test it, and then press load. As you can see, it's gone to 80 and 0. So that has been stored. It's persistent between opening and closing the application, which is exactly what we wanted.